Good day, everyone. My name is Arvind Singh, the founder of AWLS and the CEO for Quest on the Frontier. Welcome to this very first edition of AWLS EY Executive Briefing Series. This partnership hopes to bring contemporary subjects that are of interest to executives, particularly women executives. So welcome you once again. And now I hand over to my colleague from EY, Mr. Sanjeev Chatra, to take this forward from here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Arvind, and thanks for your collaboration and partnership. Very, very excited to be here. So hi, everyone. Welcome for what is going to be the first of a series of executive briefings that we've committed to help accelerate the learning as well as the access in some of the emerging topics of future growth. I'm based in Singapore. My role at EY, I'm responsible for, I'm a partner at the firm. I work across all service lines, primarily focused on financial services and helping them get access to all of our service lines across EY. And I'm really, really pleased that two of my colleagues are here joining me. If we go to the next slide, we've got a very simple agenda. We talk about generative AI. The focus really of the conversation today would be to demystify GenAI. Specifically, we recognize that the audience here is going to be very diverse across different industries, different countries, as well as different level of understanding of this topic. So we did not want to make this too complicated from a technology point of view. So my apologies to anybody who's already very conversant on this topic. The intent is really to help level the playing field a little bit. And a lot of times people have a desire to learn more about the topic, but they don't know how to ask or where to go. So the intent really of this is to provide that platform. As I mentioned, I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Mary Claude and Nina, who are also here. They are going to do most of the topic. And it's great to see a talent like both Nina and Mary Claude. They are deep experts around this domain. Mary Claude works extensively in the field of analytics and AI across the world with a number of our clients. And Nina has been very focused also as a partner at the firm around business transformation and using the power of some of the emerging technologies, including AI and ML. If we go to the next slide, I wanted to do a little bit of a refresh on what these briefings are. These are a series of talks that EY has committed in collaboration with Arvind and the team at Quest on the Frontier and Asian Women in Leadership Summit. We announced this a few months ago in Singapore that we'll be hosting these briefings around those topics where there is future growth as well as we feel there's not adequate women representation. While having said that, these briefings are not limited only to women. So I'm very pleased to see many of the male colleagues have also joined. Idea behind these remains to provide you with the opportunity to get at least a baseline understanding around a certain topic. Hopefully, it provides a leveling ground for many of the people. And I'm convinced, just as Microsoft Office many years ago had completely changed the white-collar jobs, some of these new topics like GenAI, like blockchain, etc., are also going to be par for the course in the future. So it's really important that executives engage and learn about these and get more acquainted with it and not feel nervous or unsure about what it exactly does. On the next slide, we've just called out, because there is obviously a lot of talk about Gen AI, but unlike many of the other new technologies when they've come into the field and have probably created a big splash, but hasn't found the roots, Gen AI, we're seeing already tremendous amount of adoption. It was the fastest, to get to 100 million users, but now we are seeing actually businesses take it to proof of concepts and beyond that, apply it in their mainstream businesses. And it is being recognized by industry leaders. And in our engagements with our clients, we're also seeing increasingly it's actually delivering very tangible results to enterprises, be it around improving efficiency, enhancing their creativity, or improving the experiences from a user's point of view. And I thought it would be useful just to put that as a backdrop, because this is not just a new tool where people are thinking about what it might do. We are actually seeing a lot of use cases And today, Nina and Mary Claude are actually going to be sharing some of those across different industries. With that, I'm going to hand over to Mary Claude and Nina, who will be doing most of the talking. Please keep, if you have any questions, I mean, the chat is available, so just write in over there. I'll try and moderate those questions and interject as required. And we'll also keep some time at the end for QA. With that, Mary Claude, over to you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here today to talk to you about generative AI. So as Sanjeev has mentioned, it's more of a demystifying what it means and how it can be used within the organization. So let's start with a few key concepts. I think you've probably heard a lot of those words recently or in the past few years, and sometimes it's difficult to make out what they mean or how they interrelated. So basically what we see is that artificial intelligence is really the umbrella term for all of those technology that try to mimic human intelligence. So anything that try to reason, make prediction, make forecasts are all under this umbrella term of artificial intelligence, which was coined in the early 40s. And then a few years later came machine learning. So late 1950s, we saw machine learning. And this was the first instance where we were basically using data to try to infer relationship to get to an output. So that was really the first instance of trying to have the machine learn almost by themselves. And then there was a long period of time because unfortunately in those years, we didn't have that much data and we didn't have that much compute. So those techniques were more conceptual than actually applicable to organizations. So with the arrival of the computer at home and in the workplace, we started having a lot more data, a lot more compute. So in the early 2000s, there was a lot more research again in that field of AI and came deep learning. So you might have heard of a neural network. So deep learning are those techniques where you have millions of layers of neural network, and it's basically trying to get a lot more fine understanding of the relationship and patterns within the data. And then more recently, actually, already 6 years ago came generative AI, but I'm sure most of you have heard for the first time about generative AI when ChatGPT was released late last year, and it was the first time that really people could have such algorithm in their hands and really get to connect and understand some of those capabilities. So generative AI is the latest in artificial intelligence, but it's probably not the last. There are obviously still a lot of research and a lot of breakthroughs that we can expect. And potentially in the next few years or even the next few months, there might be another bubble here that we add in terms of the next generation of AI. So if we look at ChatGPT more specifically, I think when it was released, I think it was quite well done in the sense that it was very intuitive to use. So people could just log in to ChatGPT and start having a conversation. So I think this is where those tools become very, very useful, is when it's so easy to use that it can follow your discussion. You can use natural language to interact with them. That's really how it got phenomenal popularity in only a few months, and I would say even in only a few weeks. But ChatGPT is only one example of those generative AI algorithm, and we'll talk about a few other applications. But most of you would have been familiar with that instance. So what does it mean, GPT? We have ChatGPT, which is freely available. We have different GPT model, 3.5 and 4 and so on. But what really does it mean? And we won't get into too much technical, but what GPT stands for is generative, which is quite obvious. It generates new content. So in the case of large language model that are language-based, it's really, you give them text and it will create new text for you. The P stands for pre-train, and I'll get back to that. And then finally, T means transformer, and it's just the specific architecture of the model. So it's the way the model is architect. But the interesting part is really around pre-train, because before what we had a lot of models, which means that organization needed to get a lot of data and train those models internally to get to the level of accuracy that they needed. those large model are so large, as the name indicate, that they have been trained on almost all of the internet content, which means that they can be used as is for a lot of multiple tasks. And that's really one of the main changes that we're seeing, is that before, let's call it traditional AI, we had very narrow type of model that could do a single task. Now we're having those new models that can do multiple tasks. So for example, if you look at ChatGPT, which was trained for question and answer, not only can it do that, but it can also help you summarize, it can help you extract sentiment, it can help you do a number of different functions. So we call that emerging capabilities. And this is just a sample of organization that now have been taking generative AI at the forefront. So you can see there are basically two categories. One, which are what we call vertical ecosystems. So they're basically leveraging those models that exist to build new product, new services, and embed them into their business model. So that's one category of organization. And early in the year, we were trying to track all of those organizations that were leveraging generative AI as core component of their organization. But at some point, we ended up stopping, because basically that slide would have thousands and thousands of organizations, because it has been a very fast adoption. When we look at the adoption curve of technology, usually you have innovator that slowly adapt, and then it goes into mainstream until laggards adopt. What we're seeing with generative AI is that the speed of adoption is 13 to 15% faster than other new technology that we see usually. So already, even in a few months, a few years that those technology being available, it has been everywhere around us in the past few months. And what you have at the bottom are those core companies that are building those models and have trained those models. So they really are the company that have invested significantly in terms of building those models. The most common one is the GPT models that have been done by OpenAI, but Anthropic is another company that have been building Claude. DeepMind has also their own version of different large language model, but also image generation. Hugging Face has publicly available models as well, and we could probably add Meta here as well, who have now released a few models that are open source. And one important thing to mention is that obviously we're a lot familiar with those models that generate text, but we have different type of model that can not only generate text, but generate images, videos, code, audio, so almost every type of medium that a human uses. But what's even more impressive is that now we're seeing a lot of those models that can not only generate one type of content, but they can generate both images and text and so on. So we're mentioning those as multi-modal. So they have different modes of output, basically. And one thing that we've done is that we looked at the new patents that were granted recently. And what we find out is a significant amount of those patents are linked to generative AI. So about 40% of those new patents had a component around generative AI. So if you think that innovation was going fast, it's just going to go faster, because we're seeing a significant amount of money that is poured into startups and also bigger companies to help them research and come up with new breakthroughs. So we can expect that those generative AI model, even though not perfect, will probably improve in the next few months, in the next few years, and we'll see other breakthroughs as well in the space of AI. But the other thing that is quite interesting as well is that before, when you register a patent, it usually takes years before you bring it to market. So the time between lab and market has been usually years, if not decades, in some instances. But now we're seeing that the time required to go to market has much decreased. So we're usually looking at 18 months. And in some cases, it's actually only a few months. So again, the speed at which we'll see those innovation, we can definitely say that we're living in that world of exponential technology. Just the fact that ChatGPT reached about 100 million users in less than a month of being released is quite phenomenal as well. And we're just seeing an amplification of those results. So definitely stay tuned for more breakthroughs and more application. And on that, I'll pass it to Nina to talk to us about some of the applications.
So maybe Nina, perhaps just before you go, I wanted to just and see if there are any questions. Obviously, feel free to type in if you have any questions on the chat. But let's just take a pause and give it 30 seconds in case anybody has any questions. If not, then Nina will take it further. Okay. So if not, then Nina, go ahead. And feel free, everyone, if you have any questions or thoughts or comments, to type into the chat. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Sanjeev. So I think thanks, Marie-Claude, for covering what ChatGPT is and how it has been evolving, or generative AI actually, over the last years. When we get out in the market, a lot of discussions are around how ChatGPT can be used, or generative AI can be used in day-to-day life. So what we are seeing is we have tried to categorize into broad buckets, and obviously the list is evolving. More use cases and more applications are coming up. We see a lot of work around summarizing. So when you have to summarize your emails, you are reading large articles and output has to be summarized. So summarizing is something that is working quite fine. Content creation is going to the next level. And that's where we see a lot of use cases coming in, no matter which industry it is. But the marketing and the generative content is picking up quite a bit of speed, because now this can be personalized as well. So we will cover that a little bit more in detail on the next slide. From technology perspective as well, a lot of use cases around code generations, where a lot of time is being spent as well. You can give commands to your generative AI and the simple codes can be creative. It's learning quite fast. Whenever there is new information available, it's based on the data set that the generative AI is feeding on as well. So the feedback loop is there and it learns quite fast. Knowledge management is another area where we are seeing a lot of generative AI use cases. So it's your internal knowledge management resources, wherein you yourself can go and do quick research, trying to understand rather than going into document by document to look at particular topics. You can give command and the generative AI can get into all the different content from knowledge management perspective and bring it back to you. And as we say, it's adding on to those knowledge management content as well once new content comes in. Language translation, I think, is another very interesting use case, wherein whether it's a contact center, scripts coming in, that the language can be translated very easily by ChatGPT or generative AI. Text classification, a lot of sentiment analysis that can happen based on the modulation of the voice or the way people are writing emails, and sometimes it's difficult to gauge or what it is when everyone is busy. So the use of generative AI is to evaluate the kind of words the users are using or the customers are using, or in whichever field you are, and to make predictive analysis around that. And and the last one is around unstructured text. So a lot of text that we use these days, or the data, is in unstructured format, which is difficult for various applications to read and draw inferences on. So generative AI can get into these unstructured text as well and make sense out of the data that is there. So those are, I would say, high-level things, but maybe what we will do in the next slide is a little bit break it down. And I think if you move on to the next slide, what we see there, various functions, no matter in which industry you are. I hope you can relate to the whole value chain from sales to operations. And these are I would say, the most interesting things that we are seeing in marketing and sales. And this is something that we have been working with one of our clients as well. Instead of going by customer segments, a lot of stuff can be personalized and contextualized. So based on how you or your customers are interacting with the online channels or the offline channels as well, the generative AI can read into the previous behavioral context. If you are responding to an email during your transit to office, or you are opening a particular type of email or message that is going to you. So based on a lot of analysis, the generative AI tools, and again, it's a combination of different tools, as Marie-Claude was mentioning as well. It's text, it's video, it can combine everything together based on the intel that is getting on from all the backend models to generate specific marketing campaigns for you, which will be only for you. So I will get something which is based on my preferences rather than a customer segment, because right now a lot of things that are happening from a marketing perspective is based on maybe it's a customer age between 15 to 25. The person would like this. It's a male, it's a female, living here. And then there is a blast off campaigns. So we see one of the most prominent area where generative AI is used is around the marketing and the creation of sales pitch, promotional stuff, which is very much customized to your target audience. Operations is another area wherein there's a lot of repetitive tasks that is happening at the back end. A lot of things can be looked at from ChatGPT perspective, plus also all the, I would say, one interesting use case is around the whole contact center piece that we are seeing as well, that wherever we are interacting or the organization is interacting with a lot of customer queries, generative AI can look into the pattern of the calls that are coming in or emails that are coming in, draw inferences, get into the knowledge management use cases as well to look at what needs to be done, etc. as well. Another example would be from insurance perspective as well that we have quoted on the screen, is to look at if someone has submitted a claim. It's a combination again of different technologies coming together to look at whether that claim is real, is the person who's submitting the claim is as per the KYC documents that are sitting at the back end, going and matching the ID with the photo, coming back, even evaluating whether it's a fraudulent claim or it's the right claim, and then paying it out to the customer if it's a low risk or a high risk kind of a claim. So again, it's a combination of OCR, NLP, and generative AI coming together to deliver this. Employee optimization is another area wherein we are seeing when someone is interacting and they have a lot of emails to look at, a lot of queries that are coming in. Generative AI can get into the analysis of the emails, shortening your time to respond to emails as well. And that's where we see a lot of day-to-day uses of generative AI, which are kind of enhancing the productivity as well as releasing time. Maybe I'll not go into each of these, but again, legal risk and compliance, very document intensive. What we have also seen is that in addition to generating content, it can also go back to your compliance documents to do a citation, to look at from where a particular clause was looked at, whether this particular text that is generated, whether it follows your guidelines from legal perspective, compliance perspective. We do the same on marketing side as well to go and match with the brand compliance rules as well. And again, it's again learning and feeding. If a particular content is modified, it will go back and feed to the models as well. Technology, big one. I think a lot of codes, whether it's data analysis, Python, a lot of things can be automated. And it's again bringing new analysis to the forefront. It's not only about automating the part, but it's also the insights that are being generated are going to the next level with the use of generative AI. Similarly, support functions in a lot of organizations are benefiting as well to understand whether it's the initial screening process for CVs, onboarding process. A lot of these things are now being looked at from generative AI perspective in terms of how it can be enhanced, more insight-driven decisioning that can be made as well. So again, looking at various use cases, but this is just illustrative. We can go very beyond into education, I would say industry as well. A lot of discussions around how much the usage of ChatGPT should be allowed in education, in schools and colleges, whether it should be learning with generative AI or without generative AI. So across the industries, we see a lot of interesting use cases or the way Gen AI is being adopted. And again, I think we will keep on seeing new things coming in this field in coming time. Maybe I'll pause if you have any questions, or Marie-Claude, if you want to add on. What we have also done is in next few slides, we are getting down to the next level of detail. These are more from industry perspective. We also wanted to show you, if you are using your day-to-day Microsoft tools or emails, how generative AI can help you in your day-to-day life as well by reducing some time. Not everyone has to be an expert on PPTs, Excel nowadays, and generative AI can do a lot of that work for you. So maybe we get down to the next level of detail on one of the use cases that Marie-Claude can take you through. But we can take a pause as well if we have any questions.
So, there is one question that's come direct, and I'll address that. I think between you and Marie-Claude should be able to answer, which is that how can we know that the results generated from the generative AI can be trusted? The issue of explainability versus transparency has been raised. What are the thoughts on this issue? And I know later we are going to talk a little bit more around risk, but perhaps give some reactions to that. Sorry, you're still on mute, Marie-Claude.
Okay, you hear me now? Okay, perfect. So we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but just to answer that here, obviously, one thing that we have a very strong view is basically those tools are meant to augment people, not to replace people. So if you use those technology blindly and just expect that they will be 100% accurate, that's definitely not the right way to use it. And we've seen a number of examples where things went completely wrong. For example, a lawyer in the US that just asked ChatGPT for precedent, and then he brought that to court, and it was completely made up. So obviously, there's an expectation, and there's a lot of user terms agreement that when you use those tools, you're still accountable to use this output and validate the output as well. So that's one component of it. We'll talk also a bit about copyright later on, but that's definitely our strong position on using it to augment rather than replace people.
Any other questions or thoughts? I think this slide was also an important one, why the team kind of included here, because a lot of times people may think if it's anything to do with AI, it's more for the tech folks. Hopefully the examples that Nina has talked about, you'll see every role in modern organizations can potentially use the power of GenAI or may get impacted. So hence we've kind of got a cross-section across different industries, and people hopefully should be able to relate to it.
So
any other?
Yeah, hi, Sharon here. I had a question around, I mean, obviously it creates a lot of anxiety, and in terms of the employees, right? One of the things in HR we try to do is look at upskilling or reskilling. Is there anything you're going to cover today which can at least give us some direction around, like, what are some of the organizations doing in this space of getting ready for some of the change? For example, in the engineering space, we know that, I have senior leaders salivating over the fact that, ChatGPT, that means I can reduce the number of coders I need. I don't need that many testers, but we still have a workforce, right? So that's where I was coming from when I asked the question.
No, I think that's a very good point. And also, if we take the example of EY, basically, we also look at what's the impact on our business of those technology. And again, we really see that this is to help augment people. So you were mentioning in software development and so on, we do a lot of technology consulting work, and we're seeing that those tools do help us to do the work, but it doesn't completely replace how we do the work. And we're seeing a lot more studies being published as well. And obviously, software engineer is a good example, because the tool of generative AI have been applied to coding for a bit longer. So we were able to see that a lot of coders, I think it's 90% of coders now, are leveraging some kind of generative AI tools. And then even if you go on GitHub, which is like the biggest code repository that is open source, now 40% of the code on GitHub is generated by a generative AI. But what we're seeing as well is that if you're not a coder and you're trying to use those tools, the output of it won't be very good. So you still need to know your craft before you can really make the most out of those tools. So again, it's because they're not 100% accurate, they're not completely foolproof. You need to know how to use those tools. That if you don't have the basic knowledge of your craft, it's going to be very difficult. It can help you to a certain extent, of course, but it's not going to be able to make you the best software engineer out there. So we're still see that there's a lot of benefit in understanding the basics and understanding the role, and not using those tools blindly.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other question before we move on to some examples? So I'll just continue to post your question in the chat. So one thing that we wanted to show you is that you'll probably start seeing in a lot of your favorite tools, in a lot of your favorite software, this small box there where you can type questions. And it's basically a lot of the tech company now that have software, that have apps, are adding those generative AI tools within their ecosystem. And this is just a simple example, and Sharon, that might help answer some of your question as well. So that's a simple example. Let's say you're a sales analyst. So before, what you needed to do, you needed to extract the data that you wanted to look at. You needed to build your table, build your graph, and then starting doing different analysis to know where was the driver of growth or the lack of growth, and do all of those analysis. Now, if you're using those tools, what you need to do is quite different. You can have a dialogue with your spreadsheet, basically, to ask it to import the data, to build the table with your color scheme from your organization and things like that. And you can ask it to start doing analysis, but what you need to do is to be able to ask the right question, to understand what it is that you're looking for, to make sense of the output of the tool itself. So now, rather than needing to be like a spreadsheet wizard, what you need to become is someone that needs to be able to ask the right question and use critical thinking. And that's quite key. Again, I don't think we'll say it enough, but if you use blindly what you get out of the tool, it's really not going to get to the outcomes that you need. So judgment, critical thinking are going to become really, really important skills for the future of the workforce. And one thing that helps people to use their critical thinking is really to build awareness around those technologies and how they work, and some of the pitfalls and shortcomings of those technologies. And to some extent, it's not so different than a few years ago when Photoshop arrived. Like initially, people weren't fully aware of what you could do and how you can change picture, but now everybody knows when you look at a picture now that you need to be, that potentially there are filters that are being used and things like that. So similarly with those technology, you'll start understanding what can be done, what cannot be done by machine as well, and how to use it in the best way. And because now we're seeing those tools being around for a few months, in some instances a few years, we're seeing a few studies being published. And one that was quite interesting is one that was published around a software company that had a technical call center. So basically where you called when you had issue with the software. And what they realized is that when they give new employee access to the generative AI tool, it took them only 2 months to be at the same level of employee that were there since 6 months. So they still needed time to get trained and to learn. But because they got access to all of that tacit knowledge of the organization, because basically the generative AI was looking for similar challenges that were resolved before and suggest ways to resolve the issue. So it took them a lot less time to be able to resolve those and to be at the same level. The other thing that they realized as well is that lower performing employees were benefiting a lot from those tools as well. Good employees were benefiting as well, but in proportionally not as much. So it does help overall productivity for the overall workforce. So it seems that it was very positive in terms of productivity gain. But again, not replacing, but really augmenting people. So those that are the ones that you'll be starting to use almost on a daily basis, that are embedded into what you do and are very meant for more personal productivity. What we're seeing as well now is more applications that are designed specifically for certain process. And that's just a quick demo that I'll show you. I think most of you will have some kind of interaction with contracts, so that's usually one that people can refer quite quickly with. So rather than using an open source version, this was solution with the documentation of a specific organization and making call to an enterprise grade type of model. So what we're doing here is that we're downloading one of the contract of the organization to be able to extract key information from the tool. So what we'll see is that the contract that we have called, we can extract key component of it. So what is the contract type, what's the address, and so on. But we can also ask questions from that document. So rather than leveraging the knowledge of the model from all of the internet, this is very specific in questioning that specific contract. So we can ask question around what's the responsibility and limitation of liability. So what the tool will do is that it will search through the contract and extract an answer. So the first part is really the answer that is coming from the ChatGPT based on the contract. And then it refers to you to the actual clause in the contract so that you can really validate the information that has been provided. The other thing that can be done, and those are just a simple example, if you have a template contract that you usually use and you want to make sure that your new contract align in terms of the clause, you can download your template and you can download your new contract. And what it will tell you is if all of your clauses that you need to have in your contract have been added to your new contract. So it will make a comparison for you in terms of what needs to be there. And then it shows that all of the commercial clauses that you need and all of the legal clauses that you need have been included in your new contract. So there's a number of things that you can do, and depending on what's your need or what's your process, you can engineer those solutions that help you fast track some of the components. And then when you see that they're issued, then you can obviously go through the contract, you can refer it, and so on. So it's usually tools that can help you get sense of a lot of the documentation that you have within the organization.
Yeah, just to add on to what Marie-Claude is also mentioning, ChatGPT normally would go through the generate as in through the web, whereas what we are seeing in use cases wherein organizations wants to train the model only on their own data set. I think that's where we are seeing a lot of usage or use cases within the organizations, that rather than looking at information through the web, it can go into your policies, your process, your procedures, checks and all, and come back to you with relevant information. So it's completely up to how do you train your models and the database that you redirect it to. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you. So we just wanted to talk to you about some of the key risks and challenges that we see about generative AI, and we already had a question around that. So we see 4 big buckets around some of the key risks. One is obviously the trust and accuracy. I think we raised it before. Those tools are basically statistically driven, so they're not factual driven, which means that if you ask factual question, they might not give you the exact answer. So the ability to validate and not just use the information coming out of those models is quite key, and for people to know how to use them is also very, very important. The other thing that can help as well is when you use enterprise grade type of model, there's different feature that you can basically different knob that you can use, and there's a knob specifically for creativity. So if you want the model to be very creative, for example, if you're using it for building a new campaign and you want to have idea, you can crank up a bit the notch around creativity, and then it will be a lot more creative in the way that it gives you answer. But for example, if you use it in the same way that we just show around contract, then you can lower the creativity level. So then the chances of it being accurate is much more likely. So there are different knobs that you can use to help shape the type of outcome from the model as well. There's obviously challenges around privacy, surveillance, and accuracy. And I think this is where it is important to make the difference between those models that are open and that you can just log in on the internet and just use it. Usually the terms and condition of those tools are very different than the one that you would have that you pay for it, that would be enterprise grade on a cloud system and so on. So I think the one that most people are familiar with is ChatGPT, and what ChatGPT mentioned is that if you use the free version, they will keep the data to at some point train their model. So you need to be very careful on the type of information that you use with the public free version. It's very different when you use enterprise grade and you pay for it. There, obviously, all of them are slightly different, but in most cases, it's pretty clear that those data remains yours and they won't be used to retrain the model. So a very different approach. Some of the security around cybersecurity and so on don't change much because it's generative AI. It's obviously very important that your cybersecurity measure are in place, regardless of it being AI or otherwise, and always be careful when sharing confidential and private information. The challenge around fairness and bias is slightly different in the sense that all of those models have been trained on data that have been generated by human, and human are inherently biased. So obviously those tools learn our human bias. And it's also biased towards the majority. So a lot of the internet has been written in English. So obviously the understanding quote unquote of English is much better than other languages in some cases. So we need to make sure that we understand the type of bias that those tools might have. When you think about those image generator, for example, if you ask for a picture or a picture of a doctor, chances are that the outcome will be a white male doctor, because a lot of the pictures that we have on the internet of doctors are white male doctors, just because historically that was the case. Though we're seeing organization and organizations that are building those models starting to put randomizer. So if you ask for a simple doctor, then you have this randomized generator that will generate different gender and different race, so that you don't always get the same thing. But these are obviously still in the realm of research. There's a lot of focus that has been put to try to minimize bias. Usually those companies that build those large models also curate the data upfront. But again, even people that curate the data have some bias. So we need to make sure that we look at that we are conscious and again, use our critical thinking when we use the output of those models. And just on the last one, legal issues. This is again a very evolving field. Legal always follow through new technology, but we're already seeing a few ruling that has been released. For example, in the US, it has been mentioned that the output of a generative AI model wouldn't be copyrightable unless you do significant changes to the output. In Japan, what they have been ruling is that if you use data as part of your training data, copyright doesn't really stand because you use so much data that removing one or two component wouldn't make a difference. So we're still, obviously, there's still a lot that will be happening on those front, but there's already a few companies like Microsoft, I think was last week, that said that if any company was sued around infringement of IP by using their tools, they would cover any all of the legal fees. So a lot of those companies that build those models are taking the risk and accountability on that front as well. But it's definitely an evolving field that we monitor, and a lot of jurisdictions are actually looking at how to look into this. And just to finish off, I think one of the questions that we often have is where should we get started? How do we start playing around with those technologies? What we recommend is really around identifying which use case would get value for your organization. It's important to right size it, not too big, not too small, but still to generate value to quickly start and get learning. And that's a way for your organization to upskill as well. We were talking about upskilling. So that's a way for people that are interested to get to know more and really test it out in your organization and understand some of the value and learnings through this. Another important component, and that's a bit of the reason we're having this presentation today, is also about educating leaders and professionals about those technology, because it will become very prevalent. Even if you as an organization doesn't have your own use cases, it will be part of the tools that you're using. So bringing awareness, understanding some of the risk is a significant component of being successful with those tools. And then obviously, as you get more mature, looking at AI governance and developing partnership. I don't know of any organization that have done it on their own. It's usually take a whole village to be able to move forward and understand. So it's about working with your academics, working with your startup in your ecosystem, working with your different vendors that you have, and really looking at how to evolve technology in your organization. So on that, I'll pause and open up for a question, if any. Back to you, Sanjeev.
Thanks, Marie-Claude. So there is another direct question, and I think it's more on the use case examples that you shared earlier. So this is about how GenAI is able to pick up context, as an example in the contract example that you gave. So the question is, can GenAI check for employment law anomalies for a particular country or multiple countries? So I guess, when you're doing that extraction of information, applying GenAI, can it also, in addition to what the internal enterprise information might be for compliance, also look for market-specific questions?
Yes, actually, it all depends on how you engineer the solution. So the model is there, the model exists, but how you use it and how you bring the context through different documents is really where you see the value. So that's why we're talking about use cases in organization. It's really understanding what are some of the challenges, and then how you solution the tool around it. And what we've done in some cases is really building that knowledge repository and this engineering around when, as a user, you ask a question similar to a ChatGPT, you would ask a question. I don't know, maybe what's the difference between Thailand and Malaysia in terms of employment rules? That means that in your knowledge repository, you would have those different law clauses that the model would understand, and then get into the knowledge repository and extract the context to it. So it's not only about the model itself, but it's how you solution that with your knowledge repository. So usually those are custom made, but yeah, definitely possible to add that context to those tools. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. So there are a couple of other questions also. One question from Arvind, what are some of the killer apps? So I assume, which are the more popular apps that have now been built up on that entire stack that you referred earlier? And how are companies setting up training employees for productivity enhancing tools like ChatGPT, etc.?
Killer app is a good question. obviously, I think ChatGPT is definitely by far the most popular because it was one of the first one, and that's the one that people got comfortable. But there are many more depending on what you're trying to do in terms of images. You have the like of Midjourney as one example, but there are many of them out there, and I think it's just important to look at some of the terms and condition and how to use them. But there are many different ones, and also it depends. For example, there's some that are more meant for personal use and some that are meant for more or the organization. So then again, it really depends on what's important for your organization, what type of processes you're looking at, and how organizations are setting up training for employees. So different organization goes different ways, but what we've been seeing is that there's a lot of organization now that are at least building some GenAI awareness or GenAI 101 type of training that very similar to data privacy, for example, that most organization has as compulsory, are now adding that as part of their training. And it really depends on the philosophy of each organization on training, but we're seeing more and more organization having those like 101 type of training being compulsory.
And
Yeah, and
Nina,
I think it's
the next
also,
one- Yeah.
sorry.
No, go ahead. You add to that, and then there's another one which I think is more specific for yours.
Sure. No, just adding on to that as well, right? In terms of how organizations are looking at it, in addition to giving access training, a lot of the trainings that we are seeing internally at EY as well, I think querying is becoming a skill. So we see that a lot of training programs are coming across on that. The GenAI technology infrastructure wise is being set up as well. If it has to be restricted within the organization, and people are giving access so they can experiment and look at the different use cases. So I think from day to day, even to the enterprise level, no matter which company we speak to these days, they are doing something. So I think more exploratory right now, but I think everyone is looking at training, as Marie-Claude mentioned, basic training, but also looking at the next level of use cases as well that they are looking at right now.
And that's a good segue into the next question that's coming direct, which is give a few examples of some quick win pilot use cases. So you've obviously covered a range of different use cases. Where you're finding the organizations being able to get the fastest time to return on their investments, quick wins in some of those examples.
Maybe I'll add one or two, and Marie-Claude, you can add more as well. I think knowledge management internally or content management is somewhere we are seeing a lot of use cases. Everyone has a plethora of information within the organization. So how that knowledge can be harnessed so that we don't reinvent the wheel every time. So, and this is something that is very easy, very feasible, because we are looking into, or the GenAI, the way Marie-Claude was mentioning as well, is set up more to the internal databases, data sources, so it's controlled usage. And we see a lot of usage around there. Marketing is another area wherein we are seeing a lot of use cases in terms of marketing campaigns that are being auto-generated. But obviously, there's a lot of checks and balances that needs to be done against the company's branding guideline, which can also be trained on the GenAI models. So marketing, operations, content management are the key ones that we are seeing right now. Maybe Marie-Claude, something on risk, fraud that you want to add that you are seeing?
Yeah, but I do echo knowledge management, I think, is the key one, and knowledge management broadly, and it apply in different different components. So for example, it could be just to query your own HR IT policies, for just simplify it for your user. A lot of organizations that have been using chatbot internally are looking to re-platform those chatbot using generative AI, because usually the accuracy is much better, but also because they already have the basis there for them to make the change quite quickly. I think the other thing that we've been seeing, which has been quite helpful for organization, is giving internal access to ChatGPT. So rather than people having to go online and use ChatGPT, they make a enterprise level, so one that is secure, private, and so on, to their employees. So that's not a specific use cases, but that's a good start for organization to let their employee play with it, rather than just banning completely the use of ChatGPT or the likes for their organization. And under risk, not necessarily a use case, but I would say we're seeing a lot of interest from organization around risk and internal audit to see how they need to prepare themselves to be ready to audit those new tools and those new use cases within the organization.
And then there's another one, which probably is the last, which is more, I think, specific from a leadership, coaching, individual one-on-one point of view. So have you seen any applications of GenAI in one-to-one or a leadership team coaching? Anything that comes to mind? I mean, I definitely know of cases where individuals are using it more to be able to either respond in certain situations and how they draft their communication internally. But have you seen anything more broader from a leadership coaching point of view?
I haven't seen anything specific, but it's true that I've come across a lot of instances where people use it at more of a sounding board. I think the generating component of it is quite interesting because you can a lot of people use it to understand blind spot. So you can ask question, you say you have a strategy XYZ, is there anything I'm missing? What are other points? So coaching in that sense of sounding board, I've seen a lot of senior executive use it in that sense. But the question on one-on-one coaching is quite interesting. I haven't come across anything yet like that. We've seen a lot of similar generative AI around upskilling, but it's usually more in some cases more clerical work than senior leadership. But that's a very interesting one. I'll make sure to look out for that.
Anything you want to add?
No, I think Marie-Claude covered it. Haven't seen specifics on this yet. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So look, we are just about at time. I think maybe we will conclude this call over here. But I again wanted to thank all of you. I mean, you've kind of made a personal commitment and demonstrated curiosity on a new topic. And I know at times it can be quite uncomfortable. From EY, I mean, this was part of our commitment to try and level the playing field to ensure we don't kind of take forward a lot of those traditional biases that have existed, particularly around new emerging topics. And hence, do reach out if there's anything more that you may want to explore. The team at AWLS has been collaborating, so feel free to reach out to them or directly to any of us. As I mentioned right at the start, and Arvind also noted, this is part of a series of similar talks, and we would love to welcome your thoughts on any other new emerging topic that you may want to learn a bit more about, and we'll find the right experts within the organization to come in and talk about that. With that, again, thank you so much and have a great day ahead. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.